The moment Evelyn Carter heard her son shout, "I want you out of my life," she felt something shatter inside her that no doctor could ever mend. At 90 years old, she had survived wars, loss, and loneliness, but nothing compared to being thrown out of her own bedroom in the home she had built with her late husband. The cold November air creeping through the windows of her Ohio house suddenly felt like a mirror of what had just happened. And in that moment, she realized that sometimes the cruelest betrayals come from the people we raise with love. The small house on Maple Ridge Lane had always carried a sense of comfort. Cinnamon in the air, quilts folded neatly on chairs, photos from decades of family milestones. But tonight, every wall felt colder, as though the house itself knew something sacred had been broken. Evelyn sat rigidly on her floral armchair, a wool blanket draped over her thin legs. She heard the muffled sound of footsteps upstairs, belonging to the same boy who once begged her to leave the hallway light on at night. Michael, now 52, had grown into a man she barely recognized. Years of stress at work, a painful divorce, and financial trouble had shaped him into someone sharp-edged and impatient. His temper grew shorter with every passing month, and his tenderness, once his finest trait, had faded into something unrecognizable. It broke her heart to see him this way, but it broke her even more to witness where that anger had landed tonight. She could still hear the words in her head. "I want you out of my life." The sentence clung to her like a shadow she couldn't shake off. She pressed her hand to her chest, wishing pressure might soothe the ache forming beneath her ribs, but it only seemed to tighten, like fingers closing around her heart. Outside, a gust of icy wind rattled the windows. Neighbors had already decorated their porches for Thanksgiving. Pumpkins, garlands, warm string lights. Children's laughter carried faintly from down the street as families prepared for the holiday weekend. It felt cruel how life could continue so normally when hers was quietly falling apart. Evelyn knew Michael had been struggling. She knew about the sleepless nights, the bills he left unopened, the way he avoided phone calls. But she never imagined his frustration would turn into something so cold and final. He had told her he needed her bedroom for a home office, yet the look in his eyes told the real story. It wasn't about work. It was about pushing her aside. She stared at the staircase, her hearing aid catching the soft creak of wood as he paced. Each footstep echoed down the hallway, making her chest tighten. The tension in the house had been growing for weeks, but she never expected it to explode like this. If you were in her place, who would you turn to? Her old wooden cane rested beside the chair, worn smooth from years of use. Her late husband, Thomas, had carved it by hand on their front porch, back when his hands still had strength. Holding it always gave her a sense of protection, as if part of him still stood beside her. Tonight, she clung to it more tightly than ever. Her gaze drifted to the family portrait above the fireplace. She and Thomas stood smiling behind a messy-haired young Michael who held a half-melted ice cream cone. Love looked so permanent in photographs. Too bad real life wasn't always as faithful. Evelyn wondered when the boy in that picture had disappeared, and how long she had pretended not to notice. A cardboard box lay near the hallway, filled with her sweaters, knitting needles, and framed memories. Michael had packed it without a single conversation, without even looking her in the eye. That silent action carried a cruelty that echoed louder than any shouted sentence. Packing someone's things is a quiet way of saying they no longer belong. Evelyn felt dizziness wash over her as she closed her eyes. She wasn't afraid of growing old. She wasn't even afraid of being alone. What frightened her was the realization that she was no longer wanted. Not in her bedroom, not in this house, not even in the life of her own child. Share your truth. Have you ever watched someone hide their pain just to protect a family? Outside, a car slowed, its headlights sweeping across the wall and illuminating dust particles drifting like tiny memories suspended in air. Anyone passing by would see nothing wrong. A quiet house on a quiet street preparing for the holiday season. Pain rarely looks dramatic from the outside. Upstairs, Michael's footsteps stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, almost unnatural. Evelyn's breath trembled as she waited, wondering whether he would come down, apologize, shout again, or ignore her entirely. Sometimes silence hurts more than any words spoken in anger. Then, without warning, a door slammed upstairs, loud enough to make her flinch. But before she could steady her breathing, she heard something else. A soft voice. A voice that didn't belong to Michael. A voice that didn't belong in the house at all. Evelyn leaned forward, gripping her cane, her pulse skipping, because the voice coming from the top of the stairs was one she hadn't heard in nearly a decade, and the moment she recognized it, her entire body went cold. The voice drifting from the top of the stairs was soft, familiar, and impossible. Evelyn's heart stumbled in her chest as she slowly lifted her gaze. For a moment she wondered if the stress, the shouting, and her 90-year-old memory were playing a trick on her. But the second she saw the silhouette framed by the dim hallway light, she knew she wasn't imagining anything. Standing near the banister was a woman she had not seen in nearly 10 years. Shoulders drawn with uncertainty, hands curled around the railing, breath trembling as if she didn't know whether she was welcome. Even through the shadows, Evelyn recognized her instantly. Sarah, her daughter, her child who had walked out of the family after a fight no one had ever healed from. Tears filled Evelyn's eyes, blurring the image of the daughter she had missed every single day. She remembered Sarah's laughter echoing through the hallways when she was little, remembered brushing out her tangled hair before church on Sundays. She remembered the way Sarah used to hum while setting the dinner table, the way she held Evelyn's hand during thunderstorms. But she also remembered the night Sarah stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving a silence that lasted nearly a decade. The living room felt like it was spinning slightly as Evelyn tried to absorb what she was seeing. Her hands trembled around her cane, her breath thin and shaky. "Sarah?" she whispered, unsure her voice would even reach the woman standing above her. For a moment, Sarah didn't move. Then she nodded, her eyes softening as they filled with pain. "It's me, Mom," she said quietly. "I heard what happened. I came as fast as I could." "Heard what happened?" Evelyn's pulse quickened, confusion knotting in her chest. How could Sarah possibly know what occurred tonight when they hadn't spoken in years? The question settled inside her like a cold stone. Sarah descended a few steps, hesitant, scanning the living room as if stepping into a memory frozen in time. The unpacked box, the dim lamps, the tension in the air. They told a story she didn't need to ask about. She reached the bottom step but kept a respectful distance, as though unsure if she had the right to come closer. Sometimes the unfinished wounds between people create invisible walls taller than any house. Evelyn remembered the last argument between her children. Sarah accused Michael of manipulating the family finances after their father's death. She warned Evelyn that Michael was hiding things, controlling things, becoming someone dangerous. But Evelyn, drowning in grief and desperate to keep her family intact, insisted that her son would never do such a thing. "He's your brother," she had said. "Family takes care of each other." If only she had listened. Have you ever dismissed someone you loved because the truth felt too painful to accept? Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke again. "Mom, I'm so sorry I stayed away." There was a depth in her tone that came from years of guilt, years of wanting to come back, but being too afraid, too ashamed, too tired. "I thought you didn't want me here anymore," she added. The words stabbed at Evelyn's heart. She had never wanted distance, only peace. But peace built on silence always collapses. Her daughter slowly crossed the final steps, kneeling beside her. She brushed a tear from Evelyn's cheek with a tenderness that brought back decades of memories. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone with him," Sarah whispered. "Not with the way he's been acting." The certainty in her voice sent a shiver through Evelyn. It was as if Sarah already knew far more than she should. Outside, wind buffeted the siding of the house, rattling the gutters and shaking a loose shutter. A streetlight flickered across the road, giving the night a restless, uneasy glow. It reminded Evelyn of the storms from her childhood, the ones where she waited on her mother's porch for the thunder to pass. Except the storm now was her own son, and the thunder came from inside the walls. A memory rose uninvited. Michael at 13, slamming his bedroom door when she asked about a failing grade. Michael at 23, shouting when she suggested therapy after his first job loss. Michael at 35, punching the steering wheel during his divorce. She had spent years believing she could calm him, soothe him, guide him, but storms don't always listen to the hands trying to quiet them. Sarah's eyes shifted to the upper hallway where Michael's door remained shut. "He didn't want me here," she murmured. "He made that very clear." Evelyn swallowed hard. "Why now?" she asked, her voice frail. "Why come after all these years?" Sarah looked toward the window as if checking whether anyone was outside. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because someone contacted me. Someone who's been watching this house." The room seemed to exhale and collapse inward with that single sentence. "Watching the house?" Evelyn's hand tightened around her cane, her knuckles white. She suddenly became aware of the dark corners, the quiet street, the strange shadows outside. She wondered if she had missed something, someone over the past weeks. Sarah took her hand gently. "Mom, Michael hasn't been honest with you," she said. "There are things he's hidden, things you should have known." Evelyn felt her breath falter. She had suspected something for months. Bank statements that didn't make sense, letters Michael grabbed before she could read them, the way he stiffened when she mentioned Thomas's old pension. But each time she questioned it, he brushed her aside. Before she could speak, the floorboard upstairs creaked loudly. Sarah's head snapped up immediately, her body tensing with instinctive caution. Evelyn's heartbeat quickened as the footsteps began. Slow, deliberate, growing closer. She felt an old fear stir inside her, one she had pushed down for too long. The footsteps continued down the hallway above them, each one measured, heavy, unsettling. Sarah positioned herself instinctively in front of her mother, as if preparing for something unpredictable. The shadows at the top of the staircase shifted slightly. And then Michael appeared, his expression unreadable, his eyes trained directly on the two of them, as if he had been listening far longer than they realized. He stepped down one stair, then another, then stopped halfway, gripping the railing with a slow, almost rehearsed calm. "I know why you're here," he said to Sarah, his voice low and steady. "But you made a mistake coming back tonight." Michael's eyes narrowed as he stared down the staircase, the dim hallway light carving sharp angles across his face. Sarah instinctively straightened, her shoulders tight, her stance protective. Evelyn felt her breath quicken, sensing the electricity in the air, the dangerous kind before a bolt of lightning strikes. She could see something simmering behind Michael's eyes, something she had ignored for far too long. He descended another step, the wood creaking beneath his weight. "You shouldn't have come back here," he muttered, his voice low and controlled. His gaze shifted momentarily to the boxes he'd packed earlier, as if afraid Sarah might undo the separation he had forced. Evelyn saw his jaw clench as he looked at his sister, old resentment rising like smoke. Sarah met his stare with steady determination. "I came because Mom needs help," she said, "and you know it." Her tone carried years of swallowed truths, screams never spoken, and pain never addressed. Michael's lips twisted into a bitter half-smile. "You think you know what she needs? You left." The accusation hit the room like a sudden gust of cold wind. Evelyn felt Sarah flinch, but her daughter didn't look away. "I didn't leave, Mom," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I left you." The words hung in the air, tense and trembling, like a truth waiting a decade to escape. Her voice steadied as she added, "You made it impossible to stay." Michael's fingers dug into the wooden railing. "You think you're better than me?" he snapped. "You think you can come back here and judge me?" His tone sharpened, his breath heavy. Evelyn's hands trembled against her blanket. She had seen him angry before, but something tonight felt different. More calculated, more controlled, more dangerous. Sarah took a small step closer to her mother. "This isn't about me," she said. "It's about what you're doing to her." She gestured to Evelyn with a gentle movement, but it was enough to unleash Michael's anger. "I take care of her," he barked. "I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one paying the bills, the one sacrificing everything." Evelyn felt a tear roll down her cheek. He hadn't been taking care of her for months. He had been isolating her, slowly, quietly, subtly, and she had allowed it because she loved him. If this moment hits you, tell me, who would you trust? Michael continued down 2 more steps, his shadow stretching across the living room floor. You don't get to walk in after 10 years and pretend you care, he spat. The bitterness in his voice carried a lifetime of scars, old wounds Evelyn had never treated, maybe because she never realized how deep they went. Sarah inhaled slowly, steadying herself. I've always cared, she said. You just didn't want me here. Outside, a car door slammed somewhere down the street. The distant sound startled Evelyn, reminding her how quiet the house had become over the years. She remembered when their home was filled with laughter, piano music, late-night movie marathons. Now every sound felt like a warning. Sarah kept her eyes locked on Michael. Stop pretending this is about loyalty, she said. This is about control, about the money, about Dad's pension, about the letters you've been hiding. Michael's expression flickered, just for a moment. But that was enough. Evelyn's heart dropped. So it was true. The pension, the letters, the secrecy. She had known something wasn't right, but she refused to believe her own instincts. Have you ever ignored a truth because it was too painful to face? Michael's gaze snapped back to Sarah. You don't know anything, he growled, but there was fear in his voice now, thin but noticeable. Sarah stepped closer to her mother, keeping one hand gently on Evelyn's shoulder. Mom deserves honesty, she said. She deserves safety, and she deserves her own bedroom. Michael let out a laugh, short, sharp, humorless. Her bedroom, he said. That room is mine now. I need space. I need privacy. I need... But his words faltered when he saw something in Sarah's eyes. Recognition, knowledge, proof. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. Michael, I know about the notices. He froze. The overdue mortgage, the loans, the money you took from Mom's accounts. Evelyn felt her stomach twist. Her money, her home, her life. I told you, Sarah continued. Someone reached out to me. Someone who's been watching the house. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She looked toward the front door, toward the windows, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. Watching us, she whispered. Michael's voice cracked with anger. You had no right to come back, he shouted. No right to spy on me. No right to interfere. He reached the bottom of the stairs in 3 fast, heavy steps, his presence suddenly overwhelming the small living room. Sarah didn't flinch. She stood like a shield in front of their mother. The tension in the room swelled, thick and suffocating. Evelyn gripped her daughter's sleeve, her heart pounding erratically. Please, she whispered, barely able to breathe. Stop this, both of you. But neither one heard her. Old arguments had resurfaced, louder, sharper, poisoned by years of silence. Michael took 1 step closer, his expression darkening. You don't understand anything, he said, his voice low and trembling. You don't know what I've been dealing with. For the first time tonight, Evelyn heard something different in his tone. Not anger, but fear. A fear she didn't recognize. A fear that made her chest tighten. Sarah didn't back down. Then tell us, she said gently. Tell Mom the truth. Tell her what you've done. Michael's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. His breathing grew shaky. For a split second, he looked like a frightened child again, lost and overwhelmed. Evelyn's heart broke all over again. But the moment passed as quickly as it came. His expression hardened, anger returning like a mask he had worn for years. You want the truth? He said. Fine. He stepped even closer, lowering his voice to a chilling whisper. But you're both going to regret hearing it. Behind him, somewhere near the hallway, something shifted. A faint sound neither Sarah nor Evelyn recognized. Michael paused, turning his head slightly. His eyes narrowed, and the atmosphere in the house changed, as if someone else was inside. A faint noise drifted from the hallway, soft, almost imperceptible, but enough to make Michael's head snap toward the sound. Sarah stiffened immediately. Evelyn clutched the arm of the chair, her heart pounding as fear crept through her like a cold current. Nothing should have been moving in that hallway. Nothing and no one. Michael's breathing changed, shallower now, sharper, as if something unexpected had disrupted whatever story he intended to tell. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, scanning the dim entrance to the hallway. Evelyn nodded slowly, unable to form words. The house felt suddenly alive in all the wrong ways, holding its breath as if bracing for something unseen. Michael stepped toward the hallway, his shoulders rigid, his jaw pulsing. "Stay here," he muttered, but Sarah quickly positioned herself between him and their mother. "You don't tell me what to do," she said quietly, her voice steady but trembling beneath the surface. Evelyn could feel Sarah's fear through the slight tension in her arm. Another sound followed, a creak, slow and deliberate, like weight shifting on old floorboards. Evelyn's breath hitched. Sarah's eyes darted toward the hallway again. Michael, now visibly shaken, forced his voice into something resembling calm. "Probably just the house settling," he said. But even he didn't believe it. For years Evelyn had lived with his anger, his unpredictable moods, his long nights pacing until sunrise. But she had never seen him look like this. Uncertain, startled, almost frightened. It made her wonder what exactly he had done. And who might know? If you were here right now, would you trust your instincts or run? Michael took a slow step toward the hallway, but before he reached the entrance, a soft tapping echoed from the front door. 3 gentle knocks. The 3 of them froze. Sarah's hand instinctively tightened over her mother's. Michael turned back, eyes wide, confusion and panic colliding in his expression. The knocking came again, slightly louder this time. Not aggressive, but patient, controlled, almost as if the person on the other side already knew what they would find inside. Evelyn felt a chill crawl across her arms. No one ever visited this late, especially not unannounced. The neighborhood was quiet, the street calm. This wasn't a time for visitors. Michael approached the door slowly, his shoulders tight with caution. Sarah hovered protectively near their mother, ready to shield her from whatever stood behind the door. Evelyn watched Michael's hand tremble slightly as he reached for the knob. "Michael, wait," she whispered, but it was too late. He pulled the door open. A man in a gray coat stood on the porch, his face half lit by the weak glow of the street lamp. He carried a slim folder tucked under one arm, and his expression was calm but serious. "Evening," he said politely. "I'm looking for Evelyn Carter." His voice was steady, professional. Sarah felt Evelyn stiffen under her hand. Michael stepped in front of the doorway, blocking the stranger's view. "She's not available," he snapped. "Whatever this is, you need to leave." The man didn't flinch. He simply tilted his head slightly, observing Michael with a measured look. "Are you her son?" he asked. Michael clenched his jaw but didn't answer. Sarah stood abruptly. "I'm her daughter," she said, moving toward the door. The man nodded respectfully. "Then you're the one I need to speak with as well." He slid a card from his coat and handed it to her. Sarah's eyes widened as she read it. Evelyn watched her daughter's face drain of color. The card belonged to a federal investigator. Evelyn's pulse roared in her ears. She wiped her hands against the blanket, heart trembling. A federal investigator? In her quiet home? On a cold November night? Michael stepped back, his face twisting with something between panic and fury. "You can't be here," he muttered, voice cracking at the edges. "You need a warrant." The man remained steady, unfazed. "I don't need a warrant to ask questions, Mr. Carter," he replied calmly. "We've been monitoring suspicious financial activity connected to this residence for several months." Evelyn's breath faltered. Sarah stared at her brother, her suspicion suddenly turning into confirmation. Michael's hands curled into fists. "Get out!" he growled. "You have no right." The investigator raised a hand calmly. "Mrs. Carter," he said, turning to Evelyn with a soft, empathetic expression, "I believe you may be the victim of financial exploitation." Evelyn's chest tightened. The world around her seemed to tilt. Sarah stepped closer to her mother. "We suspected something," she whispered, "but we didn't know how bad it was." The investigator nodded. "We didn't know either, until recently." He glanced toward the hallway, then back at Michael. "Your son has been under review for misappropriating funds from your accounts, falsifying documents, and taking out loans under your name. Evelyn felt tears fill her eyes. Hot, heavy, unbearable. She had trusted Michael. She had believed he was drowning, not dragging her down with him. Her hands shook uncontrollably. "Michael," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Is that true?" Michael turned away, refusing to meet her gaze. "It's not what you think," he muttered. "I had reasons." Sarah took a step forward, her voice trembling with anger. "Reasons?" she spat. "You stole from your own mother." Before the investigator could continue, another sound echoed from deeper in the house. A subtle movement, a shuffle, something, or someone, inside the hallway. The investigator turned sharply. Sarah froze. Evelyn's breath stopped. Michael's face went pale. And then from the dark hallway a figure stepped out. Someone none of them expected to see inside the house. A shape emerged from the dark hallway, slowly, quietly, as though it had been waiting for the exact moment to step into the light. Evelyn's breath hitched as the figure came into focus. A man, thin, gray around the edges, wrapped in an old winter coat that didn't seem to belong to him. His face was weathered, eyes sunken, beard uneven, but his posture, his familiar weary posture, made Evelyn's blood run cold. Because she knew him. She knew him instantly. It was her brother, Leonard, the man she believed had died 6 years ago. The room spun around her. She gripped the armrest, gasping for breath. Memories collided in her mind. Funeral flowers, a phone call, condolences. But standing before her, trembling and hollow-eyed, was the man she had mourned. Sarah covered her mouth in shock. Michael took a step back, his face draining of color. The investigator stiffened, scanning Leonard with a calculating, practiced eye. Evelyn's voice barely escaped her lips. "Leonard?" she whispered. Tears blurred her sight. How are you alive?" Her brother didn't speak. His lip quivered, but no words came. It was as if he had forgotten how to form them. The silence in the room grew so thick it became suffocating. Sarah reached toward him, hesitant. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice breaking. "What happened to you?" Leonard's eyes shifted from Sarah to Evelyn, then finally to Michael, and something inside that gaze, fear, dread, apology, sent a shiver through the investigator standing beside the door. Michael exhaled shakily, his expression twisting into something caught between fury and panic. "He shouldn't be here!" he snapped. "He has no right to be in this house." Sarah turned on him. "Michael, what is going on?" she demanded. "You said he died. You told us he was gone." Her voice trembled with betrayal. The investigator raised an eyebrow. "You told the family he was deceased?" he asked calmly, though his eyes showed sharp interest. Michael's jaw clenched. "I didn't tell them," he said defensively. "I just never corrected them." Evelyn felt her heart crack open. Never corrected them? She had mourned her own brother because of her son's silence. Leonard's voice emerged at last, a fragile, broken whisper. "He took my papers." Evelyn's breath caught. Leonard's voice trembled as he tried again. "My ID, my mail, my pension checks." Each word sounded like it cost him a piece of his remaining strength. "He made them think I was gone." Sarah staggered as the truth slammed into her. Evelyn felt the room tilt violently. The investigator stepped forward, expression darkening. "Mr. Carter," he said to Michael, "is your uncle implying you stole his identity?" Michael didn't answer. His silence was louder than any confession. Evelyn's heart ached with every beat, each one slower than the last. She remembered Leonard before everything went wrong, laughing at barbecues, fixing her sink, telling jokes that made her choke on sweet tea. To think he had lived in suffering while she believed he was resting in peace felt like a wound she couldn't reach. "Where were you?" she whispered, trembling. Leonard swallowed hard. "Shelters," he murmured. "Motel rooms. Streets." Evelyn pressed a hand to her chest, fighting the wave of nausea rising inside her. "Why didn't you come to me?" she asked. "Why didn't you tell me?" A tear slid down Leonard's cheek. "He threatened to put me in a care home," he said quietly. "Said he'd tell them I wasn't fit. Said I'd be locked away forever." Sarah turned on Michael, trembling with rage. You threatened him? She cried. Why? Why would you do that? Michael's breathing grew erratic. I needed the money, he hissed. And someone had to help with Mom's bills. Dad's pension wasn't enough, the mortgage. Evelyn cut him off, her voice trembling. You used my money. Now you're telling me you used his too? Michael slammed his fist against the wall. I didn't have another choice, he shouted. You don't understand. I was drowning. Sarah shook her head, eyes shining with angry tears. You weren't drowning, she said. You were letting us drown so you could stay afloat. Evelyn's whole body shook, her heart pounding unevenly. She looked at her son, the boy she raised, the man she trusted, and she felt something inside her break with finality. I would have helped you, she whispered. You didn't have to steal. You didn't have to lie. You didn't have to hurt us. Her voice cracked. Why didn't you just tell me? Michael looked at her with hollow, exhausted eyes. Because I knew you'd still love me, he whispered. And I didn't want to see that love fade if you knew what I'd done. His voice trembled. I didn't want to be the disappointment I became. Evelyn closed her eyes, tears streaming, because her love hadn't faded. It had been weaponized. Leonard suddenly swayed, grabbing the wall for balance. The investigator moved fast, supporting him by the arm. He needs medical attention, the agent said firmly. He's malnourished, exhausted, and he's afraid. Sarah rushed to help. Evelyn tried to stand, but her legs trembled violently beneath her. Michael backed away, panic rippling across his face. No, he whispered. No, this wasn't supposed to happen tonight. Sarah turned sharply. What was supposed to happen? She demanded. What else have you done? Michael didn't speak. He didn't have to, because at that exact moment, the front porch light flickered. Then footsteps echoed outside. Multiple footsteps. Heavy, purposeful. Evelyn felt her blood freeze. Someone else had arrived. Someone who wasn't knocking. Someone who wasn't here for conversation. The heavy footsteps outside grew louder, crunching across the frosted November grass. Sarah moved instinctively in front of Evelyn while the investigator shifted his weight, ready for anything. Even Michael's face lost what little color it had left. For a moment, none of them breathed, until a sharp knock rattled the front door. Quick and urgent, not patient like before. The investigator lifted a hand. Stay back, he instructed quietly. He approached the door with controlled steps, his other hand hovering near his coat pocket. Evelyn watched him with trembling hands, praying silently that whoever stood outside wasn't another threat. Something inside her whispered this night still held more danger. When he opened the door, cold air rushed into the living room, and behind it stood two uniformed police officers, their flashlights reflecting off the investigator's badge. The older officer stepped forward. We got your call, he said to the investigator. You reported a possible dependent adult abuse case in progress? The investigator nodded. And now we also have a case of identity theft and financial exploitation. Yawn relief washed across Evelyn's body, weak but real. Help had come. Not for Michael, but for her. For Leonard. For the truth. Sarah released a shaky breath, her shoulders softening by a fraction. Thank God, she whispered. Evelyn felt that whisper like a brief touch of warmth in a night full of shadows. Michael flinched as the officers entered. You didn't have to bring them, he muttered, voice quivering in a way that made him sound suddenly small. I can explain everything. See, the older officer looked him over with a calm, unreadable expression. You can explain down at the station, he said. For now, we need to make sure your mother and uncle are safe. Sarah's face flooded with emotion, relief, sadness, something like victory, but wrapped in sorrow. She knelt beside Evelyn again. Mom, you're safe now, she whispered. Evelyn nodded faintly, tears gathering in her eyes. I didn't know, she murmured. I didn't know he had hurt Leonard. I didn't know he took money. I didn't know. Sarah took her hands. You couldn't have known. You trusted him. You always trusted too deeply. Leonard, weak and leaning heavily on the investigator, lifted his gaze toward his sister. I tried to come back, he whispered, voice fragile. I wanted to tell you, but every time I got close, he stopped me. Evelyn's heart broke all over again. "Oh, Leonard," she cried. "I thought you were gone. I thought I lost you." Her brother nodded, a tear sliding down his worn cheek. "I know. I'm sorry." The younger officer glanced toward the hallway, his flashlight sweeping across the shadows. "We'll need to do a walkthrough of the home," he said. "We need to see if there's anything else here. Papers, mail, anything that could help." Michael tensed immediately. "You can't go in there," he snapped. The officer stared at him calmly. "Son, I can. And I will." For the first time, a spark of something bright flickered inside Evelyn. Justice. Not vengeance, not anger, but the fragile beginning of truth finally taking shape. She had spent years shrinking herself, making excuses, trying to keep peace at any cost. Tonight, for the first time, she felt a shift, a small, fragile reclaiming of her own life. Sarah held her hand tighter. "Mom, listen to me," she said gently. "You're not going back into that bedroom. You're not being pushed out of anything. I'm here now. I'm staying." Evelyn blinked, overwhelmed. "Are you sure?" she whispered. Sarah nodded firmly. "I've lost too many years already. I don't want to lose you too. If you were in her place, would forgiveness come easily?" Michael stepped forward suddenly, desperation twisting his features. "Mom," he cried, "you have to tell them this is a misunderstanding. You know I'd never hurt you." His voice cracked as he looked at her, frantic, pleading, almost childlike. Evelyn felt her heart lurch painfully. This was still her son, still the boy who once held her hand crossing the street. But then she remembered the boxes, the stolen money, the lies, the way he let her believe Leonard was dead, and the way he tried to take her room, her life, piece by piece. She wiped her tears and looked at him with trembling honesty. "I love you, Michael," she whispered, "but you hurt us. You hurt me." Michael shook his head violently. "No, no, you don't understand." The investigator stepped between them. "Mr. Carter," he said firmly, "please step aside." Michael's expression hardened, the desperation fading into something darker. "You think you know everything," he muttered. "But you don't." His voice dropped. "None of you do." The younger officer, still scanning the hallway, paused suddenly. His flashlight reflected off something on the floor, something metallic, barely visible beneath the edge of the carpet. "Sir," he called to the investigator, "you need to see this." The investigator crossed the room quickly. He knelt, lifted the carpet edge, and revealed a small, hidden lockbox embedded into the floorboards. Sarah inhaled sharply. Evelyn felt her blood turn cold. Michael's face went chalk white. The officer carefully pried the box open. Inside were stacks of envelopes, government letters, bank notices, and IDs, belonging to Leonard, to Evelyn, and overwhelmingly to Michael. Papers that proved everything Sarah suspected. Papers that proved everything the investigator feared. And something else. Something the officer lifted carefully between gloved fingers. A passport. Not Michael's. A forged passport with Michael's photo. And Leonard's name. The room fell silent. Evelyn felt the world tilt. Sarah covered her mouth. Leonard nearly collapsed. Michael whispered, "No, no," under his breath. The investigator stood slowly. His expression was no longer merely serious. Now it was grave. "Mr. Carter," he said, "you weren't just misusing funds. You were preparing to disappear." Michael backed away, shaking. "You don't know why," he whispered. "You don't understand." His eyes darted toward the kitchen, toward the back door, toward escape. The officer stepped closer, forming a barrier. But before anyone could move, before anyone could speak, another sound reverberated through the house. A loud crash. From the basement. Deep, echoing, unmistakable, as if someone else had been hiding there, all along. The crash from the basement echoed through the house like a warning shot, cutting through every breath and thought. Sarah froze, eyes wide, while Evelyn felt her entire body turn cold. The officers instinctively reached for their belts, their training kicking in with silent urgency. Even the investigator stepped back, positioning himself between the noise and the family. Michael's reaction was instant and telling. He flinched violently, panic flaring in his eyes. "Don't go down there," he snapped, voice cracking under the weight of something unspoken. The older officer turned to him sharply. "Why not?" he demanded. Michael's mouth opened, but no answer came. Only fear. Sarah grabbed Evelyn's hand. "Mom, has anyone else been in this house?" she whispered. Evelyn swallowed, her voice faint. "No, not that I know of." Bueno, but even as she said it, a chill crept across her arms. She remembered nights when she thought she heard movement downstairs, the soft shift of something heavy, the faint rhythm of footsteps. She had told herself it was the house settling. It wasn't. The younger officer approached the basement door, flashlight drawn. "Sir, stay back," he warned Michael, who looked one breath away from bolting. Sarah moved closer to her mother, shielding her as best as she could. Leonard clung to the investigator, trembling like a leaf caught in a storm. The officer slowly turned the basement knob. It clicked, unlocked. That alone was unsettling. Michael had always kept the basement locked, claiming it was full of hazards. Evelyn never questioned it. Now that door felt like a gateway into a part of her son's life she had never been allowed to see. When the officer pulled the door open, a sharp smell drifted upward, musty, damp, mixed with something metallic. The beam of his flashlight cut through darkness, illuminating the top of the staircase. Shadows twisted along the walls as if hiding something deeper inside. "Police!" the officer called out. "If someone's down there, identify yourself." Silence greeted him. Then a faint groan, a low human sound. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Oh my God," she whispered. Evelyn pressed a hand to her chest. Something was down there. Someone. She felt the weight of years settle on her shoulders. Years she may have overlooked more than she ever realized. The investigator pushed past Michael, who tried to block him, but failed as two officers surrounded him. "Stay where you are," one warned. "Do not move." Michael looked toward the basement again, eyes darting with desperation. His fear wasn't for them. It was for whatever was waiting below. The investigator stepped to the top of the stairs, shining his flashlight downward. "Hello?" he called out. "We're here to help." Another groan rose from the darkness. Painful, weak. The officer took a step down, then another, until his feet disappeared below the floor line. Sarah clung to her mother. Evelyn felt herself trembling, unable to imagine what horrors her house had been hiding. A moment later, the officer's voice echoed upward, tight with shock. "We've got a person." The investigator's eyebrows shot up. Sarah gasped. Evelyn's world tilted. Michael shut his eyes tightly. "They weren't supposed to find him," he muttered. His voice was barely audible, but everyone heard the words. Sarah spun toward him. "Find who?" she demanded. Michael looked at her, fear and guilt twisting his features. "I didn't have a choice," he whispered. "I was trying to fix things. I was trying to protect us." Protect? The word hit Evelyn like ice. Protect who? From what? Heavy footsteps clanged on the metal basement stairs as the officer slowly guided someone upward, a figure thin enough to be mistaken for a ghost. When the person emerged into the dim living room light, Evelyn's heart nearly stopped. It was a man, frail, hollow-eyed, with bruises coloring his arms, and a metal bracelet still locked around one wrist. His clothes were dirty, torn, and smelled of damp concrete. He blinked against the sudden brightness, shielding his eyes with a trembling hand. Sarah gasped. Leonard staggered. Evelyn felt her world collapse. The man from the basement was Adam, Michael's ex-wife's father, a man they all believed had moved across the country to live with extended family after the divorce. Evelyn felt the room sway. "Adam," she whispered, "what are you doing here?" The older man turned toward her, his voice cracked and frail. "He wouldn't let me leave," he choked. "I tried, but he kept taking my checks. He said I owed him. He said I couldn't tell anyone." Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. "Michael," she said quietly, voice trembling with rage and disbelief, "you locked him in the basement?" Michael swallowed hard, his eyes darting between everyone in the room. "He wasn't supposed to stay this long," he whispered. He was supposed to help me get back on my feet. Then everything spiraled. The investigator stepped forward, voice sharp but controlled. Mr. Carter, you not only exploited your mother and uncle, you unlawfully confined a dependent adult. Michael opened his mouth to protest, but the investigator cut him off. This isn't you drowning, this is you pulling everyone else under. Evelyn shook uncontrollably, the betrayal so deep it hurt to breathe. Michael, she whispered, how could you do this? How could you hurt people who loved you? She searched his face for the boy she raised, the child she once tucked into bed, the son she defended even when she shouldn't have. Michael's tears finally broke free. I didn't want to lose everything, he cried. I didn't want to fail. I didn't want you to see me as a disappointment. His voice shook. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out. Sarah stepped back, horror etched into every line of her face. You didn't fix anything, she said. You destroyed everything. She looked at her mother, who was shaking uncontrollably. Sarah wrapped her arms around Evelyn, grounding her against the chaos. Mom, she whispered, we're going to make this right. I promise. The officers moved in toward Michael, preparing to restrain him. Evelyn could barely watch. Her heart felt like it was splitting in two. Michael, she whispered, voice breaking. Please, stop. Her son looked at her one last time, broken, ashamed, terrified. But before the officers reached him, before anyone could take another step, a sharp, piercing alarm suddenly erupted from upstairs, the fire alarm, and the air filled with the unmistakable smell of smoke. The shrill scream of the fire alarm tore through the house with such intensity that everyone jumped. The flashing red light on the ceiling pulsed wildly, sending chaotic shadows dancing across the walls. Sarah's eyes flew upward, and she inhaled sharply. Smoke, she whispered, panic rising in her voice. Evelyn could already smell it. Sharp, bitter, unmistakable. The older officer moved fast. Everyone out of the house now, he commanded. The younger officer rushed toward the stairs, his flashlight cutting through the growing haze drifting down from the second floor. The investigator stayed close to Evelyn and Leonard, urging them toward the front door. But Evelyn's legs felt like water, weak and trembling, as if refusing to carry her through one more catastrophe. Michael froze where he stood. His eyes shot to the staircase, widening with horror. No, 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 this wasn't me, he stammered. I didn't set anything. His voice rose with desperation, but no one stopped to argue. Smoke thickened in the hallway with terrifying speed. Sarah grabbed Evelyn's arm and guided her toward the exit. Mom, come on, she urged. We have to move. Evelyn nodded, but her breath came unevenly. The cold November night outside should have felt like salvation, but she struggled to go. Her house, her memories, everything inside was being swallowed by smoke. The younger officer shouted from upstairs, Flames in the spare bedroom! It's spreading! The room he meant was Evelyn's old bedroom, the one Michael had tried to take for himself. Sarah's stomach dropped. Evelyn reached for Sarah's hand, her voice shaking. My quilts, Thomas's letters. Her voice cracked. All the photos. Sarah squeezed her hand tightly. We'll save what we can. But right now, we save you. Meanwhile, the officer wrestled with Leonard's weak frame, helping him toward the door. Leonard coughed violently, struggling to stay upright. Evelyn's heart twisted painfully as she looked at him. First the basement, now this. Stay with us, Leonard, she whispered. Don't leave me again. The smoke grew denser by the second, curling toward the living room like dark fingers. The younger officer burst from the staircase, coughing. It's accelerating, he yelled. We need the fire department now. The investigator grabbed his radio. Dispatch, this is Agent Walker requesting fire rescue immediately at Maple Ridge Lane. Active fire, vulnerable individuals inside. Sarah kept pushing Evelyn forward, step by painful step. Evelyn felt dizzy, her chest tightening. I can't, she gasped. Sarah, I can't breathe. Just a little farther, Mom, Sarah pleaded. Please don't stop now. If you were standing in this room, watching your family fall apart, who would you try to save first? Michael suddenly ran past them, shoving the investigator aside. "Move!" he shouted. "I need to get my documents." Sarah swung toward him. "Michael, no!" she screamed. "You can't go back up there." But he ignored her. He darted toward the staircase, toward the thickest part of the smoke where the fire glowed faintly through the haze. The older officer lunged and grabbed Michael's arm, dragging him back. "You're done," he barked. "You're not going anywhere." Michael fought against him, coughing, eyes wild with panic. "If those burn, I'm dead," he cried. "You don't understand." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "You're thinking about yourself? About documents? Mom could die." Michael stopped fighting for a moment, just long enough to meet his mother's eyes. Something flickered there. Shame? Fear? A broken piece of who he used to be? Evelyn's tears fell silently as she whispered, "Michael, please stop." But before anyone could speak another word, the smoke exploded outward from the staircase in a violent burst. Thicker, darker, hotter. The younger officer stumbled back, coughing hard. "Back out!" he yelled. "The fire's breached the hallway wall." Evelyn nearly collapsed in Sarah's arms. The investigator quickly swept her up, lifting her carefully. "We're getting you out," he said firmly. Sarah supported Leonard while the officers flanked them. Together they moved as fast as they could toward the front door, trying to outrun the growing heat. Outside, the night air hit like a slap of winter. Neighbors had begun emerging from their porches, alarmed by the smell and the flickering glow behind the curtains. Someone had already called 911. Red and blue lights began dancing faintly in the distance, fire trucks rushing down Maple Ridge Lane. Evelyn coughed violently, her lungs fighting for clean air. Sarah wrapped a coat around her trembling frame. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe now. Stay with me." Evelyn nodded weakly, though tears continued streaming down her cheeks. Leonard collapsed onto the porch bench, eyes wide and unfocused. I thought I'd never breathe fresh air again," he whispered. Sarah knelt beside him, resting her hand on his arm. "You're out now," she said softly. "No one is ever locking you away again." Michael stood near the end of the porch, hands shaking, face streaked with soot. The officers kept a close eye on him, ready for anything. He looked back at the burning house, his burning house, wearing an expression that looked like the collapse of every lie he had ever told. Evelyn watched him, her heart torn between grief and pity. But before anyone could speak, before the flames claimed another inch of the house, a scream pierced through the chaos. It came from a neighbor across the street. "There's still someone inside." Everyone turned, and what the neighbor pointed at made Evelyn's heart fall into a void. In the upstairs window, barely visible through the flames, a shadow moved. Not human. Small. Fragile. A shape Evelyn recognized instantly. Her cat, Willow, trapped in the burning bedroom. For a moment, no one moved. All eyes were locked on the upstairs window where Willow's silhouette trembled behind the glass, framed by orange flickers of flame. Evelyn's heart clenched so hard it almost stopped. She whispered the cat's name, barely able to breathe. "Willow!" The fire truck screeched to a halt in front of the house. Red lights slicing through the smoky night. Firefighters jumped out, pulling hoses, shouting to one another with practiced urgency. One of them followed the neighbors' pointing fingers and spotted the cat. "We've got an animal trapped, second floor front," he yelled. "Let's move!" Evelyn tried to stand, but her legs refused to hold her weight. "Please," she pleaded, reaching toward the house. "She's all I have left from Thomas. Please don't let her die in there." Her voice shook with a rawness that cut through the noise, through sirens and shouting and the crackle of flames. It wasn't just about a cat. It was about memories, comfort, the last simple piece of love that hadn't betrayed her. Sarah held her mother tightly, feeling her tremble. "They're going to try, Mom," she whispered. "They're trained for this." But even she couldn't hide the fear in her eyes as she watched smoke thickening around the window frame. If you were here, watching your memories burn, what would you be willing to risk? One firefighter began raising a ladder, angling it toward the front of the house. Another pulled on an oxygen mask and gear, shouting coordinates to his team. The young officer guided Leonard and Adam farther from the house, toward the safety of a neighbor's porch. The investigator remained close to Evelyn and Sarah, as if his presence alone could keep them grounded. Michael stood off to the side, his hands cuffed now, his clothes streaked with soot. He stared at the burning window, at the small, terrified outline pressed against the glass. Something shattered inside his expression. "She sleeps on Mom's feet every night," he whispered hoarsely. "She cries at the door when Mom naps too long. She thinks it's her job to protect her." The older officer glanced at him, unimpressed. "You should have thought about protecting your mother before tonight," he said. But even his voice carried a flicker of humanity as he watched the fire devour more of the roofline. The flames flared higher, licking at the night sky like a living thing. The ladder clanged against the house as the firefighter climbed toward the window. Another team dragged hoses to the front lawn, spraying arcs of water that hissed and steamed on impact. Smoke poured out in thick waves, making it harder to see Willow's shape behind the glass. Evelyn's lips moved in silent prayer. "Please, God, please." Michael watched, chest heaving. "If she loses that cat," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "After everything I've taken from her, she'll have nothing left that feels safe." His eyes followed the firefighter's progress, but the flames were spreading faster than the man could move. The heat near the front of the house grew more intense, forcing everyone farther back. Suddenly the fire shifted. The roof above the bedroom sagged visibly, wood cracking in protest. "Pull back!" one firefighter yelled to the one on the ladder. "It's not stable!" The man near the window hesitated, torn between orders and the tiny life just feet away from him. Willow's silhouette clawed helplessly at the glass. The firefighter obeyed, backing down the ladder to avoid being crushed by falling debris. Evelyn cried out, a sound so pained that even the officers flinched. "No!" she sobbed. "Please, someone save her!" Tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks, streaking paths through the soot. It felt like losing Thomas all over again. Michael's breathing turned ragged as he watched his mother collapse emotionally. "This is my fault," he whispered. "All of it. The money, Leonard, Adam, the fire, and now this." His shoulders shook. "I did this to her. I broke her." Sarah turned toward him, eyes dark with hurt. "You did," she said quietly. "But you don't have to stand there and watch it end this way." Their eyes met. Brother and sister, separated by a decade of silence and a lifetime of resentment. Michael's face twisted with conflict. Fear on one side, guilt on the other. Something like love buried deep beneath it all. He looked from Sarah to his mother, frail and sobbing, then back to the burning house. "What are you saying?" he asked, voice shaking. Sarah swallowed hard. "I'm saying you wanted a chance to fix something," she said. "Well, here it is." She gestured toward the house. "For once, do something that isn't about you." The older officer tightened his grip on Michael's arm. "Don't you even think about it," he warned. "You're in custody. You're not going anywhere near that fire." Michael's eyes didn't leave the bedroom window, where Willow's outline had nearly vanished behind the smoke. "If she dies because of me," he whispered, "she'll never look at me again, not even from a distance." Sarah's voice softened, though pain still laced every word. "You don't need her forgiveness to do the right thing," she said. "You just need to decide who you're going to be in this moment. Have you ever felt a single moment reveal exactly who someone truly is?" The next few seconds happened in a blur. A loud crack erupted from the roofline, distracting the officer for a split second. Michael twisted sharply, using the shift in weight to wrench free from the older man's grip. The cuffs remained on his wrists, but he bolted anyway, toward the house, toward the doorway glowing with sick orange light. "Michael, stop!" Sarah screamed. "Get back here!" the officer shouted. But Michael didn't stop. He ran straight toward the porch, disappearing through the front door into the smoke-filled hallway. The investigator cursed under his breath. "We've got a civilian inside," he yelled to the firefighters. "He's cuffed. No protective gear." Adrenaline surged through the scene. Two firefighters exchanged a look and moved instinctively to follow. Inside, the heat hit Michael like a wall. His eyes stung, his lungs burned. The smoke was so thick he could barely see his own hands. But he knew this house blindly. The turns, the stairs, the exact number of steps to the second floor. He counted them in his head the way he used to when he was a scared kid running to his parents' room after a nightmare. Evelyn sobbed into Sarah's shoulder as she watched her son vanish into the flames. "No," she whispered. "Not like this. I didn't want this." Her heart was torn in two. Terror for Willow, terror for Michael, grief for everything that brought them here. Love and betrayal twisted inside her, impossible to separate. One of the firefighters forced his way inside behind Michael, gear on, masks sealed, shouting instructions that were swallowed by the roar of the fire. The others adjusted their hoses, trying to contain the blaze enough to keep the structure standing. Each second that passed felt like a year. Michael stumbled in the smoke, hand sliding along the banister as he felt his way up the stairs. Heat scorched his skin. He choked, coughing violently, but he kept going. He could hear Willow crying somewhere in the distance, a tiny, panicked sound that cut through everything else. "I'm coming," he rasped. "I'm coming, girl." Down on the lawn, Evelyn clutched Sarah's hand so tightly it hurt. "I can't lose him," she whispered. "Not like this. Not after everything." Sarah's eyes shone with tears. "He did terrible things, Mom," she said softly. "But he's still your son." Evelyn nodded weakly. "And he's still yours," she answered. Inside the burning house, something exploded. A window, a beam, no one could tell from the outside. A loud crash followed, and the entire structure seemed to shudder. Flames shot higher from the roof. The fire chief swore under his breath. "We're losing the second floor," he shouted. "If they're up there, we're running out of time." Everyone on the lawn fell silent, eyes locked on the front door and the shattered upstairs window. The world narrowed to two questions. Would Michael find Willow? And would either of them come out alive? Seconds felt like hours. Then, all at once, a shape appeared at the upstairs window. A human silhouette this time, hunched and struggling, cradling something small against its chest. The crowd gasped. Evelyn's knees buckled. Sarah wrapped both arms around her to keep her standing. The glass shattered outward with a violent crack, and in the fiery frame of that broken window they saw Michael, face blackened with soot, coughing uncontrollably, holding Willow against his chest as he tried to climb onto the window ledge. The floor beneath him groaned, and then a beam above his head gave way. The last thing Evelyn saw was her son's body lurching sideways as the ceiling collapsed around him, and then he disappeared into the flames. For a few terrible seconds, the world felt like it stopped. The ceiling collapsed in a roar of splintering wood and blazing heat, swallowing the window and the silhouette that had been standing there. Evelyn screamed, a raw, broken sound that cut past sirens, orders, and the roar of the fire. Sarah held her as tightly as she could, both of them staring in horror at the flames where Michael had vanished. Firefighters moved with ruthless urgency. "We've got someone down on the second floor," one shouted into his radio. Two of them pushed through the doorway with full gear, disappearing into the burning house like shadows swallowed by light. Another team focused hoses on the upper story, trying desperately to hold back the inferno from fully consuming what remained. The wait stretched into an eternity measured in heartbeats and breaths. Evelyn clung to Sarah's coat, whispering her son's name over and over, as if it might guide him back. Leonard and Adam sat in stunned silence on the neighbor's porch, watching their world, and their tormentor, burn. For the first time in a long time, no one said a word in Michael's defense. Then, through the smoke and chaos, a shout pierced the night. "We've got him! He's alive!" A firefighter appeared at the doorway, half dragging, half carrying a limp figure across the threshold. Michael's clothes were charred, his face blackened with soot, but his chest moved, shallow, struggling, but undeniably alive. In his bound arms, pressed tightly to his chest, even in unconsciousness, was Willow. A firefighter gently pried the trembling cat from Michael's grip and passed her to a paramedic, who quickly wrapped the animal in a blanket. Another team rushed Michael to a stretcher, cutting away burned fabric, checking his pulse, shouting numbers Evelyn barely understood. She tried to move toward him, but Sarah and the investigator kept her steady. Her body was too weak for running, but her heart was already kneeling beside him. On the grass, under the rotating red lights, a paramedic pressed an oxygen mask to Michael's face. Second-degree burns, smoke inhalation, possible concussion. He called out, "He's combative. Hold him steady." Michael coughed, gasping, eyes fluttering open for a brief, disoriented moment. His gaze searched wildly until it landed on Evelyn. In that split second, something passed between them. Not excuses, not arguments, just a simple, broken recognition. She saw the terrified boy he had once been, and he saw the mother he had almost completely destroyed, and then risked his life for, in one small, desperate act. His lips moved, but no sound came before the sedative took effect, and his eyes slid shut again. The ambulance doors slammed. Sirens wailed. The night swallowed them as the vehicle sped away toward the hospital in Columbus. Evelyn watched the red lights grow smaller, then vanish, feeling a tug of war inside her chest. Her son was a criminal. Her son was also the man who had gone back into a burning house to save the last innocent piece of her life. Both things were true at once. Hours later, the waiting room smelled like antiseptic, burned coffee, and exhaustion. Evelyn sat in a wheelchair, a blanket over her lap. Willow curled like a small, trembling comma against her legs. Sarah sat beside her, fingers interlaced with hers. Leonard and Adam had been admitted for observation in another wing, finally safe under professional care instead of her son's control. The investigator approached quietly, his expression softer now. "Mrs.
Carter," he said gently, "Michael is stable. He has burns and lung damage, but the doctors believe he'll recover with time." Evelyn closed her eyes in relief and pain. "And the other part?" she asked. "The legal part?" The question tasted bitter, but she forced herself to ask it. "He will face charges," the agent replied. "Financial exploitation, identity theft, unlawful confinement, likely more once all evidence is processed." He paused. "His attempt to save the cat will be noted."
It doesn't erase what he did, but it does say something about who he still might be under everything. Evelyn nodded slowly. "People are rarely just one thing," she murmured. "That's the hardest part." Weeks passed. Winter settled over Ohio like a heavy quilt stitched with gray skies and quiet streets. The house on Maple Ridge Lane was declared unsafe and later demolished, reduced to a flattened lot covered in snow and caution tape. Evelyn never went back to see it. She said goodbye to it in her own way, through the ache in her chest whenever she smelled smoke in distant fireplaces. She moved into a small, warm apartment with Sarah on the edge of town. The place was modest, but filled quickly with blankets, framed photos salvaged by firefighters, and the smell of fresh coffee in the mornings. Willow found new favorite spots on the windowsill and at the foot of Evelyn's new bed. For the first time in years, Evelyn slept without feeling watched. Leonard and Adam were placed in a well-rated assisted living center, with real oversight and kind staff who learned their names in a matter of days. Sarah handled the paperwork, the forms, the calls with insurance agents and social workers. Evelyn visited twice a week, bringing homemade cookies and old stories. They laughed sometimes. They cried sometimes. But they were no longer living under Michael's shadow. When the court date arrived, February snow lined the courthouse steps. Evelyn insisted on testifying. "I need to tell the truth," she told Sarah. "Not just about what he did, but about what I allowed myself not to see." Sarah squeezed her hand. "Telling the truth is the most loving thing you can do now," she said. "For him, and for you. Sometimes love isn't rescue, it's honesty." Inside the courtroom, Michael sat at the defense table, thinner, quieter, a bandage still visible under his shirt collar where burns were healing. His eyes rarely left his lap. When Evelyn took the stand, her hands trembled, but her voice did not. She spoke clearly about the bank accounts, the lies, the isolation, the threats to Leonard and Adam. She did not soften it. She did not harden it either. She simply told the truth, even when it hurt. At one point, the defense attorney asked, "Do you still love your son, Mrs. Carter?" The room held its breath. Evelyn looked at Michael, really looked at him, the damaged man and the frightened child coexisting in one body. "Yes," she answered. I do. I will probably love him until my last breath." She paused. "But love does not mean letting someone keep hurting the people you care about, including yourself, especially yourself." Michael's shoulders shook as silent tears fell onto the table in front of him. He didn't lift his head. When the verdict came, guilty on multiple counts, recommended placement in a facility with both medical and correctional oversight, Evelyn held Sarah's hand and did not collapse. Her heart hurt, but for the first time, it also felt strangely honest, like a room finally cleared of smoke. Months later, she visited him. The facility was clean but sterile, a blend of hospital and prison. Doors buzzed open and shut. A guard led her to a small visitation room with a table bolted to the floor. Michael was already there, in a plain uniform, thinner than she remembered, but his eyes clearer than she had seen in years. He looked up when she entered, surprise and something like shame flickering across his face. "Mom," he said softly. The word landed between them like something fragile. Evelyn sat down, Willow's photo in a small frame tucked under her arm. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Michael exhaled. "I wasn't expecting you to come," he admitted. "After everything, after court." Evelyn studied him quietly. "I almost didn't," she said. "But you walked into a burning house for her, and for me. I needed to see what was left of the boy who did that." His eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know how to stop," he whispered. "The lying, the stealing. Every time I thought I had gone too far, I told myself I'd fix it with the next decision. And every decision made it worse." He swallowed hard. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness." Evelyn looked at him with eyes that held both sorrow and strength. "Forgiveness isn't something you deserve," she said gently. "It's something you grow into, one honest step at a time." She leaned slightly closer. "I forgive you for being broken. I do not forgive what you did to Leonard, to Adam, to me. That part is not mine to erase. It belongs to the people you hurt." Michael nodded, tears falling freely now. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it," he said. "Even if it's in here, I'm glad you told the truth. It's the first time in a long time that someone loved me enough not to protect me from consequences." His voice cracked. "Thank you for not lying for me." She slid the framed photo across the table. Willow curled on a blanket beside her knitting basket, eyes half closed in contentment. "She misses you," Evelyn said softly. "Sometimes she still waits by the door in the evening." Michael smiled through tears. "That cat has better instincts than I ever did," he whispered. When the guard signaled that time was up, Evelyn stood slowly. Michael looked up, panic briefly crossing his face. "Will I see you again?" he asked. Evelyn thought for a moment, then nodded. "If you keep doing the work they're asking you to do," she said. "If you stay honest. If you stop telling yourself stories that let you hurt people." Her gaze softened. "Then yes, I'd like to visit my son, not the man who hid behind his excuses." Outside, the air smelled like rain. Sarah waited by the car, leaning against the door with her arms folded, watching the clouds. When Evelyn approached, her daughter straightened. "How was it?" she asked. Evelyn took a slow breath. "Hard," she answered, "but lighter than I expected." She looked at her daughter with gratitude. "Thank you for coming back, for not giving up on me, even when I didn't see what was happening." They drove home past what used to be Maple Ridge Lane. The lot was empty now, a rectangle of flat earth where the house once stood. Snowmelt had turned parts of it into muddy patches. A single stubborn flower had forced its way up near the corner of the old foundation, small and wild and inexplicably brave. That evening, in their warm little apartment, Evelyn sat in her new armchair with Willow purring on her lap. Sarah cooked dinner in the small kitchen, humming softly to an old song Evelyn recognized. The TV played quietly in the background, some holiday movie about family and second chances. Leonard and Adam were scheduled to visit for Sunday lunch. Life, broken and rearranged, had somehow found a way to go on. Evelyn looked around at this new life, a life that wasn't built on pretending everything was fine, a life where she was no longer trapped in a room she could be thrown out of, but sitting in a space she had chosen for herself. She had lost a house, illusions, and the version of motherhood where love meant endless sacrifice. But she had gained something deeper, a voice, a boundary, a hard-earned peace. At 90 years old, she finally understood that love without truth is just fear, wearing a kind face. She could still love her son while refusing to let him destroy anyone else. She could grieve what he had done and still be grateful he was alive. And she could hold her cat, feel her daughter's presence, and know that whatever time she had left belonged to her, not to guilt. As the night settled gently around the apartment, Evelyn closed her eyes and let herself simply exist, no longer living inside someone else's chaos, no longer silenced by loyalty that cost too much. Somewhere far away, in a secured facility, her son began his own long journey toward whatever redemption would look like for him. And for the first time in a very long time, Evelyn Carter did not feel thrown out of her own life. She finally felt like she was home,